I did this thing called hit record for years.
Yeah, I would love to talk about that.
That was full of incredible sort of joy and catharsis for me. What that was it started out as just a little website that my brother helped me set up back in like the mid 2000s when I was, well, I'll tell the whole long story. Why not? We got some time, right? Okay, so the sort of origin story of Hit Record, I won't be too long-winded about it because we got to get to AI. But
we do, I know. We will.
I had been acting since I was a kid. And then at a certain point in sort of my early 20s, I was a young adult and I couldn't get an acting job. And
really?
It was really painful to be auditioning and trying to say, like, I can play these other parts, and no one would give me a role. And I sort of came to this conclusion, like, okay, I can't be waiting around for someone else to cast me. I've got to take matters into my own hands. And hit record was sort of a symbol for that. Like, I'm going to be the one to push the button, to hit the record button. And it was also a sort of play on words with hit record because
which
of
is what I thought it was when I read it.
Of course,
yeah.
and that's I guess sort of the thing is like if you're part of the community, you might know that it's hit record and because a hit record is what the media used to be. It used to be an object to be consumed, and in my idealistic mind in 2004, the media was becoming not just an object to consume, but was becoming an action, something to do, to hit record. And that was the sort of origin of that double entendre. And so my brother helped me set up this website where I started posting little short films and songs and stories and stuff. I was like, I'm making this, I'm not just gonna be an actor. And that grew. And it grew into this community where people at first were coming just to check out the things I was making, but what sort of emerged naturally and really inspiringly was, oh, yeah, people want to check out what I'm doing, but actually, now that we're on the internet together, we can make things together. And this sounds obvious now in 2025, like TikTok has operationalized this in a very effective and lucrative way, right? Where it sort of has productized online digital collaboration. But back when we started doing it, there weren't tools like that. And there weren't ecosystems like that. And we were sort of saying, like, what could we all make if we were making stuff together? And so we ended up making all kinds of things, and it grew and grew and grew, and eventually we launched it as a production company and said, okay, well, let's do big things, and things that can maybe even cost money and make money, and if we make money, we'll share that money with all the different artists who contributed as part of this online community. And we had a really, I think, pretty robust system to, if there was like a short film with 200 different people's pieces of content incorporated into it, if that short film made money, we would pay all of those people. And we had a whole very transparent process where we would put each person's contribution as a line item on our website and say, okay, this is the percentage that we are allocating for this. And then there was a button you could push to comment on that and have an open public conversation about these percentages and why it was that way. And the community would weigh in and say, like, hey, I think actually this deserves more, or this, you forgot this person. And because we did it in that transparent way, I think we generally had a very happy community that was really positive and felt like they understood and were getting a fair shake. Because I think as long as you're kind of clear about what you're doing and the reasoning behind it, it's not to say everybody agreed with every decision, because certainly there was disagreement. But when you're working out those disagreements in public and giving everybody their time to give their opinion and responding, it all went pretty well. And so we over the years we made TV shows, we won 2 Emmys, we put out records, we did branded content, we paid different artists millions of dollars, and we certainly never got to be a publicly traded company the size of this. But I learned a bit about what it was like. We eventually, 8 years in, decided to raise some VC money.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say that this is a story of like creative beginnings in this community, which you've built, which is amazing. You should check out the site. I joined, I was like, do I belong here?
Right.
I'm not creative, but it's a really amazing place where you can sort of opt in to contribute to projects that speak to you. And the one that I saw, where I was like, I could do that. It was like, everyone please share a picture that you took of a sunset. And I was like, I can do that.
Yeah,
That's cool. And then you have this feed of all this amazing photography of the sunset. So
there are icebreaker projects, like we call those icebreakers.
Yes, you said that one to me
get people in, and then there are more ambitious ones that, if you were feeling like challenging yourself creatively.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, so what I was gonna say, it's not, you didn't just build this creative platform, like you built a tech company. And so I'd love for you to talk about that. Like you had a CTO and you had product managers and developers, and you had an exit eventually. So talk to this room of technologists about your technology journey.
So it didn't start as a tech company, but eventually we realized, if we want to accomplish the things that we want to accomplish, in fact, I'll say, like when we first started the company, we sat, and my co-founder Jared is actually backstage, we sat and made a list of the things we would want to accomplish. And over the next 4 or 5 years, we did all those things. At the bottom was make a TV show. And we were like, could we actually make a TV show that was on TV using contributions from this online community like this? Eventually we did that, and the show won an Emmy, and we were very, happy. And then we're like, okay, now what do we do? And we got to a place of, all right, we would like to make this more accessible. We would like to be able to invite more people in to be creative in this way. And we realized pretty soon, if we're gonna do that, we need better tech. We had never been very focused on our tech. We had always said, it's not our area of expertise. We had a website, it was clunky, and we were like, that's okay. But we then said, well, what if we were able to make our website better? And what if we had an app? And what if we could actually, we started learning a lot, started going to conferences like this, frankly, and meeting people. And I'll also say, my wife she's has her background in tech and works in that industry. So she taught me a lot. And we eventually learned, what KPI stands for. We didn't know those things. And I remember one of the first times I gathered together some of the smartest people that I had a chance to meet in the tech industry, and they started asking me about what data we had. They were like, well, what's this? And what's that? How? I forget all the different numbers they were asking. We were like, well, we really know our community, we know them personally. And they were like, yes, but you don't know every single one of them personally, and this is what science is. You look at numbers. And sure, there's a qualitative field that always has to be complementary to that quantitative analysis. But we were completely missing any quantitative analysis, and I feel like I got a Stanford education over the next few years, learning how to look at numbers and analyze our community's behavior through numbers. And again, that can sound cold, I think, especially if you speak to a lot of members of our community, which are not necessarily...
They don't want to feel like numbers.
Yeah, they don't want to feel and they're not numbers. And that was actually something, for example, people would often say that we were crowdsourcing creativity, and I would always say, I don't like to think of our community as a crowd. To me, a crowd is a faceless number of stats. And what's vital that we always keep in mind is that every single member of our community is an individual human being. And sure, it is worthwhile to understand how many people are pushing this button versus how many people are pushing that button. That can inform the decisions that we make, but you need to also complement that quantitative insight with qualitative and human compassion and common sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that resonates probably very much with this group. This group of technologists and builders, we are all managing technology that has a person on the other end, and it's a really important part of what we talk about when we come together. So that's great. So I do want to turn to AI now, because I think I was really surprised, I was pleasantly surprised to learn about how much you're doing on this topic and how much you're advocating for on this topic. And so just to maybe kick it off, how did you start getting involved in the AI conversation from the perspective of the creative community? And how did that translate to, kind of where it's gone from there?
Sure, I've always been fascinated with this. I remember reading Ray Kurzweil's book, The Singularity is Unity, back in 2008, and being like, this is nuts. And Ray Kurzweil is an incredible futurist. I don't necessarily agree with everything he has to say. And in fact, I strongly disagree with him on certain things. But it's undeniable that he was really prescient and was very inspiring to me as I thought about sort of the progression of how our civilization has evolved, and even before that, and putting the digital revolution in the context of the industrial revolution, the agricultural revolution before that, et cetera. So I've been interested since then, but I also I did start paying attention to LLMs, back in, 2018 or something like that. I remember playing with GPT-2 and being so arrogant about it as an artist and a writer, and being like, hey, this is obviously silly. This is this is never going to make anything valuable. And then completely eating my words just a short, few years later, saying like, when, seeing, it was really even just GPT-3, then there was 4, but even the leap from 2 to 3 was, I think when I went, oh wow, this is very impressive. That's not to say that I think this writing is what I would call good, but it's incredible how effective it is. And certainly it's only gotten better since then. And look, I think the technology is very inspiring. And there's, you can imagine more and more people being able to create incredible, beautiful things, whereas nowadays it might cost huge amounts of money to, for example, make like a big grand scale movie. You can imagine these machine learning tools enabling people to do it for much, much, much less. And what that means is like, all right, some 14-year-old in wherever, Mumbai or somewhere, anywhere, could have the ability to make the same kind of stuff as we privileged Hollywood folks. And that's beautiful.
It is,
I also have concerns about how the technology is being implemented, and largely about the way the businesses of LLMs are run these days, namely that content and personal data is just being stolen and used to build these LLMs, and the people who made that content and who generated that personal data are not being asked for consent, are not being compensated. And to me, not only is this bad for the current creative economy, whether that, and it's not just Hollywood, I mean, anybody who's a journalist or an academic or anybody who's creating something, it's not just bad for creators. I think it sets a really concerning precedent for the future of how our economy is going to work, because more and more of our world is becoming mediated through digital technology. Of course, that's what, you guys probably know that better than I do. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. That I think can be great. But if that's the case, then we can't have it be that a few of the biggest tech companies are just allowed to take anything that anybody does or says or makes or thinks or is and make money with that and give the person nothing. That if you run that forward a few steps ahead, whether that's 5 years or 20 years ahead, that leads to this very intense concentration of capital and power and influence. It's not a good recipe for a healthy civilization and a free society. So I think one important principle that it's sort of right now is the time for us all to stand up for is your digital self belongs to you. That your ideas, the things you say, the things you write, the things you create, the things you do, those belong to you. And thanks. And I'm pleased to hear you clapping for that. And I'm not just saying this. I think security plays an important part in this.
Yeah, we were talking about this a little bit. Talk more about your views on how security plays into this.
Sure. Well, so I'll give an example. There's a bill in California right now called SB 53, Senate Bill 53, and it puts just some very basic safety and transparency protocols in place for some of the biggest companies building frontier models right now. And I don't want to say everybody agrees that this bill should be in place, because there are some of the businesses lobbying very hard against it. But a lot of the folks that I think are not strictly business minded, but are concerned with the public good, it's pretty widely agreed that some basic safety and transparency protocols are a good idea,
yeah.
and that there should be laws around these things. But if you're going to have transparency, if these labs are going to have to deliver some amount of information to the government, especially a state government, well, the state government's going to need to beef up its cybersecurity, because that's valuable information they might be delivering to the government of California. And it shouldn't be that that company is then worried that their information is going to get stolen by some hacker who's able to hack the government infrastructure of California. So I was just talking to someone about this who works in the California state legislature, and it's like, this has to be paired with bigger budgets and more emphasis on security.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Talk a little bit about the issue of jobs and economic opportunity and some of the work that you're doing around that, both in Hollywood and outside.
Yeah, so, talking about Hollywood is complicated for me. I grew up in Hollywood. I've made my living in Hollywood, and I love making movies in the old-fashioned way. I also have to admit that spending tens or hundreds of millions of dollars to make a movie shouldn't be the way that it always is into the future. That as new technology comes into being, we should find more cost-effective ways to make movies. And we should be empowering those 15-year-olds anywhere in the world to make movies that look as good as today's Hollywood movies. We want that. The question to me is, okay, how are the economics going to work? And the way that I think some of the big tech companies are arguing that those economics should work is, well, that just means that, sorry for all you creators, it's true, you're sort of out of luck. And here's the thing, if the new technology that had been invented had somehow, on its own, been able to create value that was as good as today's Hollywood movies, I'd be more like, wow, they really just kind of did invent a better mousetrap. But that's not how LLMs work. I'm not an engineer, but I've learned enough to know about how LLMs work, and I imagine a lot of you all know this too. The products being made by these AI companies can do zero things, have zero value, without the hordes of training data that are ingested in the pre-training of these LLMs. And to assert that all of that data has zero economic value, that all the people who produced all that content, all that data, deserve 0% of the economic upside, feels wrong to me.
Yeah.
It does threaten jobs. This is a big threat to jobs. And I think what makes it complicated is, even if we get this right, Hollywood's not gonna be the same.
Yeah. No industry is gonna be the same.
No
we talk about this all
agree.
the time. Every job is gonna change.
I think that's really true.
Yeah.
And so that's a very nuanced needle to thread. And when I take the position that training data deserves attribution and consent and compensation, sometimes I get the response, you're just being a Luddite. You're being anti-technology, anti-progress, you're just trying to hold on to the past. It's really not the case. I'm trying to set us up for a good future where human creativity still has an economic incentive.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily, I don't know exactly what that'll mean for Hollywood. Hollywood should be evolving. I don't think it would be fair to just all of a sudden pretend that training these models on everyone's Hollywood movies is just fair, and Hollywood deserves nothing for that. I think there's a middle ground to strike, and I think there should be conversations about, I wouldn't say job protection, but job transitions, and figuring out, and it doesn't just apply to Hollywood. This, I think, is probably the case for so many industries.
Absolutely.
I imagine you've heard, the CEO of Anthropic was just saying he thinks half of entry-level white-collar jobs are going to go away in the next some really short timeline. Now, maybe he's overestimating, and I think he's admitted as much, but that's an enormous number.
Yes.
So I don't see a responsible and ethical version of doing this where we just say, sorry, everybody, you're SOL. I'm gonna say you're shit out of luck, and we're just gonna take all of this money.
Yeah.
And again, the reason it's not fair is because their models need other people's input.
Yeah.
And so there needs to be an acknowledgement of that.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. It's cool to see the thread pulled from what you did with your community and the transparency there in attribution and credit and compensation.
Yeah.
And I can see that kind of very explicitly in what you're talking about now. We've been talking a lot this week about, our CEO, Todd McKinnon, was on stage a few days ago just talking about the experience that I think all of us are having at all of our organizations of this tension between go fast, innovate, do the AI thing, that's coming from the top, from the board, from the executives, and the balance of it's the job of the people in this room to also do that safely, and to sort of we have to do both is essentially what our CEO is saying. And you have a quote, I'm going to read it because I love it so much, that I think says a very similar thing that I think is so cool. You wrote this in an article recently. You said, whenever anyone mentions guardrails for AI, someone else objects. Nope, we have to go fast. But just because we're going fast doesn't mean we're going the right way.
Yeah.
I thought that was really great. Talk more about that.
Yeah, sure. There's a movement, perhaps some of you all are familiar with, that calls itself accelerationism. And I think it's built on a false dichotomy, meaning the idea that we just have to go fast. The assumption is, well, if we're going fast, then wherever we're getting is the right place we want to be getting. But there are so many different ways we could be going. So I think it's a bit of, frankly, dishonest sleight of hand. And what it's really hiding is, I think, some of these companies, and to me, it feels really good to be here with a company who's making money, who's very successful, and providing a service that's not predatory, that's not, here you are like a legitimately empowered head of impact. That really says something to me. But because I think there's a bit of a sleight of hand here, where profiteers who have a, frankly, religious reverence for the bottom line, and have this notion that as long as you're making maximum money, you're doing the right thing in the world. They will say, well, we have to go fast. They'll say we have to beat various international competitors. We can't lose the AI race to China. There's all these sort of scare tactics, arguments made. But to me, it seems like if you want to actually be competitive, if you want to win, so to speak, what does that mean? What does it mean to win? Does winning mean the biggest businesses currently going make the most money? Is that what winning means? Or is winning means we build a healthy society that's good for everybody and do that responsibly? And yeah, we could do that. We could do that fast. We should go fast. We should. I do not agree with the, sometimes people talk about well, let's have a pause, or let's slow down. I don't think any of those are really the right ways to be thinking about this. We should be going hard. We should be going fast. We should be recruiting the best and brightest minds from all over the world to be working on these problems. But the way to work on these problems is not just to maximize profits. Yeah. The way to work on these problems is to say, how can we build a new, upgraded society? We have to recognize that we are facing something that's as momentous as the Industrial Revolution. And we can think ahead. We can see some of the pitfalls that might arise. Let's prevent those before they happen.
Yeah.
You know, if someone had said back in the 1850s, let me give you guys a hint. See all this smoke coming out of all these smokestacks? It's gonna be a problem in about 100 years. Wouldn't that have been nice if scientists were able to say that and maybe people were able to just moderate some of their approaches, and maybe we would have invented solar panels a century earlier or something like that. We're in that position again.
Yeah.
And we have incredible thinkers, scientists, engineers, people who work in policy, who are seeing those steps ahead and saying like, hey, here are some of the things we could do now to build a future that's not just profitable for a few companies, but that's good for the wider world. And we frankly have a few of these biggest companies that are fighting as hard as they can to try to stop that from happening. And I think this is why I've become really passionate about this, because I think actually a lot of it has to do with we as a human race need to kind of come to grasp this and understand it and care about it. And so that's where the storytelling comes in, and that's sort of what I've spent my life doing. And so that's why I'm spending time writing articles like that. And
I love this, and I think, you know, there's a story that needs to be told to help people's imaginations imagine what it looks like when we get it right.
Yes.
So when you think about when we get this right, what does it look like? What's the story you tell around that? What is that?
Sure. Well, I'll say this. Every day with my kids, I talk about something we're lucky for. It makes me happy when I've said it enough to now my 3-year-old says like, oh, we're lucky to get to have this water. Or, we're lucky that we have our house. Just because I repeat it a lot. And I feel so lucky for the life I get to live. And it's abstract, but it's true that there's so many people, billions of people all over the world that don't get to have a comfortable life, don't get to have the kind of opportunity, the self-actualization, the safety that my family and I get to enjoy. There's a world where technology provides that. That is really within our grasp, where we those of us, everyone in this room is so lucky. We're gonna get to eat as much as we want today. We're sitting in a beautiful air-conditioned room. We're gonna do something fun tonight in Las Vegas. I mean, it's not that complicated, but it's really lucky. And then there are so many people out there that aren't gonna get to eat as much as they want today. That are gonna not be sitting in comfortable rooms, that are gonna be worried about whether or not they can feed their kid. I mean, sorry, this is obvious and maybe maudlin, but it's true. And like, when I think of what's the good version look like, it's not that complicated. It's just more fair. It's just that more and more people get to live a good life. And we're trending in that direction. And this is where the accelerationists and I agree. Because what those folks will point to is, look at this graph. Look at here's 1825 and here's 2025. And look at infant mortality, and look at hunger, and look at disease, and look at life expectancy, and it's all going in the right direction. And that's because of technology. I agree with that. But technology by itself is neither good nor bad. Technology is just technology, and it really depends on how people choose to use it. So the issue is, how are we going to choose to use this amazing technology that we're building these days? And can we all coordinate to sort of, let the bullies take a seat a little bit and say like, yes, great, you can have yours, but also other people get theirs. And Sure.
I love that. We are unfortunately very close to being out of time, but I wanted to ask you one final question, which is this room, this audience of builders, of security professionals, of technology professionals, what would you say to us? What's one piece of advice for us?
Wow, well, first of all, I would want to say thank you, because I'm not technical enough to be an engineer. I never learned how to code very much. I know a few things, but I meant it when I said I think technology is making the world a better place. So thank you for building that. And I would also say there's nothing wrong with making money, but if money is the only focus, it can lead to some bad side effects. And I really appreciate not only, and I guess I would say, like, businesses, corporations are charged with making money. That's all a corporation can do. But the truth is that every corporation is made of humans.
Yep.
And so it really does come down to the people who work at those corporations holding on to some values that are more than just money, and saying, like, it does come with some responsibility, all this privilege and this opportunity we have to build tomorrow's technology. And we can use it to make money, and that's good to make money, but we can also keep an eye on how, the market isn't perfect and doesn't necessarily, if all you optimize for is profits, we won't necessarily get to a good world. So let's just also keep that in mind while we're building.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you so much for an awesome conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks,
thank you.
everybody.
Joe ended on a note of thanks to all of you, which I think is very appropriate. And now I get to have the best final job of the day, which is to give thanks as well to everyone who made Oktane possible. So first, thank you to all of our sponsors for your partnership and support this week. Thank you to the thousands of you who joined us here in Las Vegas and online all around the world. Thank you to our nearly 200 speakers for leading incredible sessions this week. And congratulations to the almost 200 of you who earned Okta certifications this week. Awesome. And of course, last but not least, a huge thank you to our Okta employees and team. Thank you for bringing this entire experience to life for all of us. Thank you. All right, everyone. I hope you leave this feeling inspired to go have a great rest of your day and take this back home. Have a great rest of your Oktane, and we'll see you next year. Thanks.